Hi class, so today we're going to be talking about how to create tile sprite sheets similar to this one. This I created to look like the sprite sheet that we used in our first assignment. I created this pretty quickly using Photoshop, and I'm just going to go over the basics of how I did this. So I'm not going to recreate this whole thing. I'm going to try and just recreate one of these right here, and then I'm going to show you how to put it into one of these. So to show you this is actually where I made all of my tiles in my sprite sheet, is I made them each individually right here. And we're going to go through that whole process of how I did this. So the first thing we're going to go and do is we're going to go to File, New. We want to create a custom size. We're going to put this at 300 by 300 with a resolution of 300. So that's pretty easy. So 300, 300, 300. Now make sure that this is pixels. We do not want to do inches. That's going to be huge. All right. So whenever I get this done, I'm going to press OK. And this is pretty small. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over down to the corner here, and we're going to change this from 100 to 400. And so when I change this to 400, it's going to zoom in 400% and show us what this looks like. Now I'm going to start making a tile. So the thing that we have to remember about making tiles is that they have to be repeatable. So anything we do, we have to be able to either repeat going this way or both. So I cannot just make a tile that is non-repeatable, meaning I can't have an object on one side that hangs off that doesn't appear on the other side. And I'll walk you through how to make a basic like floor tile or world floor tile. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my paint bucket, and I'm just going to use this. Now the paint bucket just fills an area, right? So I'm going to work on making this tile sheet right here. Actually, this one right here, so that I don't have those edges. And I'll kind of explain how we're going to quickly create those edges. But I'm going to go ahead and start working on that one. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my color by clicking right down here to a brown color. I'm just going to search for a nice brown color I kind of like. Okay, that one's okay. I'm going to go okay. I'm going to paint bucket this in. So in my actual one over here, I did a gradient, and I can go into a little bit more on that. But right now I'm just working with the basics of what do I need to get down first. And so whenever I made these, I specifically did it using, for the other ones, using shapes, because with shapes, I can go in, I can change the fill, I can add gradients and everything else that I like. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add that grass to make this very similar. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to create a green square. It's okay that we don't have a gradient going on yet or anything like that. I'm just going to use my shape right here. If it wasn't on a square before, you can right click, and here's all the tools you can use. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make that green and have a little green square. And let's say I want to add in kind of this look to the bottom of it that I created with these circles. So I'm going to go back to mine. I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit ellipse tool. And with my ellipse tool, I'm just going to click and drag to create a shape. And I'm going to hold down shift while I do it. So that way it's even, like the proportions are going to be the same no matter how big or how small it is. And I just want a nice circle because I'm going to use this circle on my edge. So I'm going to take this object, and right there in the middle of it, as you can see, I have like a little dot. This shows me the exact middle. And I'm going to go and I'm going to line up my exact middle with this side. And I'm also going to make sure that I only have the parts, that I only have it to where it looks like it's hanging downward and it's not like an awkward circle. So if I click off of both of those, you can kind of see how that looks. So the next thing I have to do is I'm going to duplicate this. Now there are two ways of duplicating it. I can right click, and then I can hit duplicate layer. So once again, I right clicked in the ellipse section and I hit duplicate layer. But the way that I really like to do it is if I go over to my object while I'm on my move tool, which is this top tool, and I hold down my Alt/Options button, and I click and I drag it, I can drag it completely to the other side and create a new object or a new shape without having to do anything else. So I'm going to drag it over there. I'm going to let go of Alt and Options, and then I'm going to say, okay, I still need to adjust it a little. And so I'm just going to take it and move it slightly until it's even. Now, when I repeat this, it's repeatable going this way, right? It's repeatable left to right. It is not repeatable up to down because I've got a green top and a brown bottom. So next is what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down Alt and Options again. I'm just going to kind of place these however I want in here and just make it kind of look like it's grass. And it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just practice for me. I'm just going in here and I'm like, okay, this looks pretty good. So I might even shrink some of these circles down. They don't have to be perfect now. I got what I wanted. Press enter if we resize anything in Photoshop, right? If you are not seeing these tools to resize, make sure that your Show Transformation Controls is clicked. If I have this unclicked, it shows nothing. But when I click it, I can see how to actually move these around and how I can adjust them. So now that I have that done, I have a lot of ellipse tools over here, or a lot of, circles or ellipses in my layers in a rectangle. And instead of having all of these different things, especially since I want to add a nice gradient to it, I'm going to go and I'm going to click on the first one. At the very top, I'm going to go down all the way to the bottom where I see my rectangle. I'm going to hold down Shift, click that, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit Merge Shapes. So when I merge shapes and I can re-click on here, it's all one shape. If I go to my shape tool, you can see that all of these shapes have now been turned into one. And I'm doing this on purpose because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my fill to a gradient so that it looks really nice, because I'm going to try and copy the style of this one right here. So when I do that, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to hit fill. Right here is our gradient, so we're going to click on that. And then I'm going to say, okay, what colors do I want my gradient to be? So our opacity, which is how much we see or how much we don't see, is this top section. And our gradient colors are down here. So I'm going to double click on this black. I'm going to go over to my green. I want to find a green that I kind of like. It's darker on the bottom, right? So I'm going to put that as my green. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to double click here and I'm going to go back over. I'm going to find a lighter green that I like. And I think that's about good. Now, whenever I made my shapes over here, I actually went in and I added a few extra parts to my gradient so that I could have this little line effect to make it look like it's an actual edge. And so how I did that was I simply went into my gradient right here, and if I click on the bottom section, I can create, once again, another gradient section. So I'm going to double click this, and I want this to be the same color as my yellow as my green up there. Sorry, not yellow. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to create another one right here, and I'm going to do a really nice light green because I want that really bright color. And I'm going to say OK. And I actually like the way this looks. And I can click back onto my background to see it without those circles. I like the way this looks more than I actually like this one that I made. So I think I'm going to leave it like this. Now, the other thing that I do is I like to have it look like it's got this little ring around the bottom of it that's darker because it gives it a 3D effect. And the way I do that is I just simply go over here and I grab my move tool, and I can either, once again, right click and duplicate it using my layer section, or I can hold down my options. I'm going to pull this one lower. And you're saying, well, I'm not seeing it. Well, that's because it's on top of the other one. So I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to drag it underneath. And I can kind of see an outline coming now because I put it underneath, and you can see where this one, or where our top one, overlaps. But it's not quite the colors I want. And I don't necessarily need it to be a gradient anymore. So I'm going to go back to my shape because in our shapes, this is how we edit our colors up here. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to take it off of gradients, and I'm going to put it back on fill. I'm going to grab a darker green color. So you can either grab one from a swatch, which are what these are, or I can go in once again by clicking this and find the color I want. So I'm pretty happy with this color. I think it looks nice. I'm going to press OK. And I'm going to click off, click on my background layer, and now I can see this really nice design I've made. Now, I think that my brown is really boring right here. So I can do one of two things. I can create a big giant square shape and put a gradient on it, but that's kind of tedious. Or I can right click on my paint bucket right here, and I hit gradient tool. So on this gradient tool, I have my gradient set to a color / transparency, right? So if I so that this only puts in this color and then it goes to white, right? So I'm going to double click on this color right here. I'm going to select the color I have, and then I'm going to go darker from where that is. I'm going to hit OK. So whenever I do this, I have to make sure that as I pull this line up that chooses my gradient and what I can really see in it, that I do not have this going sideways. It has to go straight up and down because we want that 90-degree gradient. So when I get that and I'm happy with it, I let go. And now I've got this nice gradient bottom on here. Now you're thinking, oh no, what do I do whenever I want an actual ground that's not with it, that doesn't have a green above it? But that's okay, we can fix that. So I'm pretty happy with this right here as being one of my tiled textures. I could go in, I could add more detail, like I could grab more shapes and I could make like little bitty brown circles or something like that. I change the color darker and kind of just play around with these. But I don't really want to spend too much time on this. So I'm just going to go ahead and once again, I'm just going to grab these and delete those. I'm going to say, okay, this is my basic texture for a ground which my character will eventually walk on because I've got that nice green where my character is going to walk. So I'm going to go ahead and make a folder and push it all the way to the top. So a folder allows me to have a group, and I'm going to double click on this background to turn it into a regular layer so that it's not going to be locked, and I'm going to hit OK. So I double clicked here, which opens up new layer, layer 0. OK, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to shift click all of these items. I'm going to put them in my group. I'm going to right click on my group, and I'm going to hit, actually, I'm going to double click on it, sorry, and I'm going to rename this to ground. So I'm happy with how this looks. So I'm going to show you one other thing with my ground and how to create my little circular edges that I like to have it rounded off on like where we're on like side of a mountain, or if we've just got, you know, a cliff or something like that. So the first thing I do is I right click on here. I'm going to hit merge group, which takes every item in there. I no longer have shapes. It's just going to be a flat image. And then I'm going to duplicate this. I hit duplicate layer, hit OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a circle. Now it doesn't really matter what's going on with my circle because I'm going to go right up to the edge of my image right here. And I'm going to hold shift while I click and I drag it across. And I'm going to say, okay, this circle is about the right size. And how I know I've got the right size circle is I'm going to use this circle to cut and trim this edge off right here. So to do that, I'm going to once again right click, and this time I'm going to hit what's called rasterize layer. And so my rasterize layer is going to turn it from a shape into just a regular like flat image, and that's what I want it to be, so that way I can edit. So I'm going to hit rasterize layer. And now we're going to grab the magic wand tool, which is right here. So the magic wand tool allows us to select based on color. Well, while we're on the ellipse tool, or while we're on the ellipse layer, sorry, we're on the ellipse layer. If I look at this, there's only this color and no color, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the ellipse tool and I'm going to click right here in this section, you can see it's highlighting it. And when I go and I turn on my ground copy, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit delete. Oh, sorry. I need to be on my ground copy. I need to have that selected. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. Now, when I turn that off, I have this nice rounded edge. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double click this, which is another way to rename, and I'm going to hit ground L, meaning ground left. So I've got my ground L, I've got my ground left. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to duplicate my regular ground again by right clicking on ground and hitting duplicate layer. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure that I go to select, deselect, because I no longer want to have that selected. Go to my move tool, turn on the ellipse, and I swear this seems like a lot of steps, but it's really not when you start getting into it. And I'm just going to grab that ellipse tool. Oh, I need to be on the layer again, so make sure it's highlighted. I'm going to grab my ellipse right here, my ellipse shape. I'm going to bring it all the way to the other edge. And then I'm going to do the same process where I select in this little section and highlight it. I'm going to turn on my ground copy. Oh no, what did I do? I messed it up. Let me go ahead and delete this. I must have moved it on accident. I'm going to go ahead and right click again, click duplicate layer, hit OK because I'm just going to duplicate it. And now with it fixed, I'm going to go ahead and click delete. So I can turn off my ellipse tool right here, or my ellipse layer, and now I have a right side, a left side, and a ground. So I'm going to go ahead and rename by double clicking. I'm going to rename my ground right to, or my ground that was the second layer to ground right because it's on the right side. Now I can go ahead and I can get rid of this ellipse tool because I don't need it anymore. I already have it worked I already have it the way I want it to be. But let's say I have a little like mountain where it's got to be rounded on both edges. Well, I've already done most of the work I need. So I'm just going to double click, or not double click, right click on my right layer of my ground. I'm going to hit duplicate layer. Once again, I'm just going to say OK. And we're going to trick this. And the way we're going to trick this is I'm going to turn on my left, turn off my right so you can see this. I'm going to grab my magic wand tool again, select, make sure I'm on this ground L, select this section, turn it off, then go to my ground right copy and hit delete. Hit delete there. I keep forgetting to actually move over. But yes, when I hit delete, now I've got my ground, and I'm going to call this ground side. And the reason I'm calling it ground side is because either side it has missing sections. And so I'm going to call this about good for the tops of my ground. And I'm really quickly going to show you what I'm going to do for, my underground section, because we have this gradient right here. We have to figure out how we're going to make this gradient work with something that has that's something that needs to be this color at the bottom and kind of stay that color throughout, so we can duplicate it and use it from all four sides. Because right now these are only repeatable from 2. Our underground layer we're going to make has to be repeatable from all 4 sides. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go ahead and make a completely new layer. I'm going to name this underground. And now I'm going to click on my ground. And I'm going to grab my eyedropper right here, which allows me to select colors I have used in this object. And I'm going to go to the very bottom. I'm going to select that color. And then I'm going to go and make sure I'm on my underground layer, and I'm going to right click on this gradient tool, turn it back to my paint bucket, and just paint bucket it in. So right here, if I feel this looks pretty plain, which it kind of does, is I can once again go in and just start, adding little bitty like rocks or something to give it a little bit more of a textury feel, because it seems a little awkward to not have anything. Now, I'm not going to go in too much into that. Just remember that if you're going to do that, it has to be repeatable this way as far as those go. We're not going to be doing it up and down. We don't want any of our images or any of our ellipses to actually be this way and then go up, because that creates a problem with our top layer. So instead, the only way we want to have rocks be repeatable across here is this way. So if you're going to have a rock go on this side, right, just like our grass, we have to have it match on the other side right here. So these don't exactly match, but you know what I mean. So I don't really want all those. It's getting really crowded. I'm just going to delete these. It's okay. I'm going to click yes. I'm just going to go back to my plain plain underground. I like it. So now if you remember, when we made this image, we made it 300 by 300 pixels. And so now we're going to talk about how to make the actual tile sprite sheet using 300 by 300 pixels. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to go File, New, and I know that over here I can count it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's two ways I can do this. I can leave my width at 300 and I can turn my height to 1500 because I want it to have one layer of just these, and it has to be 300 times 5 because I have 5 of them. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click OK. Now you can do it this way, you can do it instead to where it's a long width and the height's really small. It's really up to you as far as what you want to do. So using that, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to start grabbing these. So to grab these and to transfer them over, I'm going to select one, grab it, and move it over. So as I do this, you're going to notice a problem. See, on the edge of here, I have my circle still coming off the edge, and it's not looking quite right, and it's not going to lay exactly how I want it. Now, on this one where it's a 300 or by 1500 this way, it's going to look fine. But let's say I had this size, right, and I've got these coming on the sides of each other. It's going to cause a problem because I'm going to start to see these little circles hanging off. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go back to my document where I have all of these on. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit this button right here, which is our crop tool. And so that'll say, okay, we want it to be cropped right here. This is the side of our normal canvas. I'm going to just go ahead and hit enter. It's going to show me all of these little circles on the sides, right? Because that's where our circles are off to the edge. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to click enter again because I want to get rid of those. So now every single one of these should be good to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this. I'm going to move it over into my Untitled 2. I'm going to drop it whenever I get onto the page or onto the canvas. So I've got my first one there. Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to grab my ground right. I'm going to do the same thing. Click on it with my move tool. Hold it over my Untitled 2 because that's my new document. And do not let go until it's on the canvas. So there's my Untitled 2. Go in again. Just repeat this process a lot. This is my ground side. That's fine. They don't have to be necessarily in a particular order right now because that's not going to really affect it. I'm going to once again line it up. Go in for my next one. And just so that I've got my underground as my last one, I'm going to go up to my ground L. Pull it over. Put it here. And then one last one. Go to my underground. Grab this. Oh, nope, I grabbed the wrong one. Make sure you're selected on the one that you are trying to grab. So I'm going to grab that grab L, or that underground. And I'm going to pull it in here. I'm going to put it at the bottom. So now we have this even type design. But if I get really close on this, up to like 400 again, you'll see that I have these white sections right here. And that's because in this in this document, I still have a background on. So before I save this, if I want to have this transparency and not have this white little section in my designs and in my game, I have to go over to my background and turn off this eye. And so when I turn off the eye that says I don't want to see this, which tells me that yep. It looks like I accidentally grabbed one of my ground L's multiple times. Let's see. What is going on here? So I've got that one, got my ground L, and then ground side. Let's see. Oh no, where is it? Oh, so I messed up one of my ground sides, but I'm not too worried about it. You can follow the instructions to get it done right. I just accidentally did the wrong one. But I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how we're going to save this. So we need to save it to where we have our transparency left there. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and we're going to change this from a Photoshop document, and please also save it as a Photoshop document. You should save it as a Photoshop document first. But I'm going to go ahead and change this to a PNG because a PNG allows us to have transparency. And then I'm going to click Save and OK. So I just did a simple ground right here, like I said before. You can do a lot more. You can do water textures like these. You can do islands. You can mess with it however you want. I was just going over bare basics. So using this information that you've been given, I want you to start building your own tile sheet. And so to start with, you have to build those tiles in that 300 by 300 pixel image. And when you get those all ready, count them up and then put them on a tile sheet. I don't expect you to finish this in one class period, trust me. But I want you to just play around with it and see what you can make. All right. Remember, before you do anything, your tiles have to be repeatable at least in one direction, either left to right or up and down, and hopefully some of them will be repeatable both ways, like my underground. Okay, so that's it. Have a great day, and I will see you guys next class period.